I truly hate to be the bearer of bad news because it would have been a lot easier if you had gotten involved in a project to create an engine that drives a meme coin casino. There probably would have been moon Lambos all around, and that would have brought a certain type of happiness to a lot of people in their moon Lambos. Unfortunately, that's not what you got involved in. And if that wasn't obvious before, it's going to be very obvious when you hear what happened during Charles's trip to Argentina, where he dropped a new video. A video I'm calling the Whiteboard 2.0 video because it should be super obvious. It should have already been super obvious, but it's going to be extremely obvious from here on out that we're not building an engine to create an NFT casino or a meme coin casino or any other type of trendy, latest fad crypto number goes up machine. You're actually involved in a project that intends to build an engine to run everything. If your response is, "Hey man, I actually only am interested in moon lampos and don't want anything to do with this network state that would be an engine for running everything," or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. I think most people in Cardano probably realize that Charles has been in Argentina, and this was a highly anticipated event because he was at this conference and he was going to be meeting with Javier Milei, who has become a little bit famous in crypto circles. I think people realized what he was trying to do with the governance of Argentina and his friendliness to crypto, and realized that this was a big opportunity for crypto. So a lot of people in Cardano were excited that Charles was going to go to Argentina, meet Milei, and maybe things would happen. So I don't think that's the biggest thing that happened in Argentina. And in fact, there were a lot of other blockchains in Argentina. Maybe most notably, Avalanche was there as well. And there are certain merits there. So there's no guarantee that anything at all is going to happen between the government of Argentina and Cardano. But that might not have been the most important thing that happened in Argentina. It might have actually been this. And as always, Tim Harrison probably put it better than I ever could have. Here was his post. I joined IOHK because of the original and had the privilege of watching the rushes earlier today, and I just watched it again on YouTube. Goosebumps on goosebumps on goosebumps. I saw this post before I actually saw the video that we're about to discuss, and I knew it was going to be something special. If Tim Harrison is talking like this, I knew it was going to be something big, and indeed it was. What he's talking about is the original whiteboard video that did bring a lot of us into Cardano in the early days. And even if you came in the later days, you probably saw Charles's famous whiteboard video that explained the vision for Cardano. While he was in Argentina, he dropped another video, another whiteboard video that sort of explains the road ahead. But it's not just a roadmap, it's sort of a declaration of what Cardano is shooting for here. And it's true. Cardano is not even trying to become the latest meme coin casino. Just like we didn't try to become the world's biggest NFT casino, just like we didn't try to become the world's ICO casino. Okay, so maybe we were a little bit. Cardano kind of came around in 2017. That was during the middle of the ICO craze. We're a little too young for that. But we definitely haven't been the type of blockchain that's shooting to participate in the latest crypto craze, because you probably noticed, if you've been around for a couple cycles, you probably noticed there's a particular trend every single cycle. It's the biggest number go up thing happening in crypto. Last cycle, you could have said maybe it was NFTs. This cycle, so far, maybe you would say it's meme coins, and specifically being an engine for people to create meme coins, create this meme coin casino so that people can speculate on these speculative assets, which is what it always is. It's always the latest trend is always some kind of speculative asset that allows people to push those dopamine buttons in their brain, right? It allows people to dream these big dreams. If I just buy the latest, whatever, dog on a pogo stick meme coin, I can have the Moon Lambo, no matter what it is, whether it's NFTs or it's a meme coin or it's an ICO of a base layer coin back in the day. It was always the same. It was that lottery feeling when you scratch off the lottery card and you get to dream for a moment. For a moment, there's a statistically improbable but extant chance that you could be in a Moon Lambo because of what you're doing at that moment. That's that dopamine button that all of these things push in your brain. And I'll be honest, a lot of crypto, that's the main thing going on. People have figured out that the gambling, the the chemical the chemical product in your brain of gambling is something that people will pay a lot of money for. This is something we've known for a long time. Gambling has existed pretty much as long as sophisticated human societies has existed. From the time humans could come up with games of chance until now, there has always been gambling in societies created by humans, and crypto is just a reflection of that. I don't think crypto is any worse at exploiting that maybe than the equities markets, uh, from all the way from the penny stock markets up to people buying Nvidia and Tesla on Robinhood or in their regular brokerage accounts. It's all the same chemical reaction in your brain that people are willing to pay for, and there's a spectrum there from very, very speculative assets that truly are gambling on par with buying scratchers at the gas station, all the way up to investing in index funds, in very reputable, blue chip type stocks. And it's the same thing in crypto. You've got the, wildest, most speculative meme coin, which is sure to tank as soon as the insiders sell off all their coins, all the way up to the top, the very high quality blue chip base layer coins like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Cardano. So crypto is just a reflection of this human impulse to push those dopamine buttons in the brain. And it would have been a lot easier if Cardano was that type of blockchain where the whole point was we were all getting together and creating this sort of fiction around decentralization, but really all we're doing is just creating a very efficient machine for people to do whatever is the latest number goes up craze. That's not what we've been doing in Cardano. We've been doing something else. And Charles laid out the second half of the plan for that something else in this video. So you might have heard me mention the phrase network state. And I'm not going to refer to what Cardano is building as a network state for a very particular reason. Not that there's anything wrong with that concept. There's just a reason why I'm not going to use that term. So if you don't know, the network state is a concept that was produced by Balaji Srinivasan, who I like a lot. He's a fascinating guy. I love to listen to his talks. He's been talking about the network state ever since a talk he gave at Y Combinator in 2013. In 2022, he eventually wrote a book called The Network State: How to Start a New Country. Since network state is Balaji's concept, I'm not going to contort and corrupt his definition. I'm going to stick to his definition, which he sums up in a single sentence like this: a network state is a highly aligned online community with a capacity for collective action. Sounds so good. Sounds good so far, right? But that crowdfunds territory around the world and eventually gains diplomatic recognition from pre-existing states. And if you're confused about that crowdfunding territory up above here, he has a longer one-paragraph definition that talks about an archipelago of crowdfunded physical territories, an on-chain census, a real estate footprint, and diplomatic recognition. This is a little bit extreme for a lot of people. I think this is also a very interesting concept. We're not going to go quite this far today. I don't think Cardano is quite ready to talk about actually purchasing real estate for its own nation state somewhere in the world. Sure, some people in Cardano are, but you don't need to sign on to that yet. You don't quite need to sign on to that yet, because I think a lot of people would consider themselves traders to their own nation states, if we start talking about buying physical real estate somewhere in the world and creating our own nation state, not to mention that all of the real estate except for Antarctica is already in a country. So you kind of, maybe end up in a war with some other country if you try to do this. We're not trying to get in any wars today. So we're not going to talk about Cardano as a network state per se, at least not according to Balaji's definition. We're going to talk about Cardano as an engine for running everything. I think in October 2024, that's ambitious enough. This whole thing is really about creating a system where corruption and abuse of power and distance from the money printer and censorship aren't the central features of the system. Instead, we need a can't be evil system, and that requires decentralization. There are basically only two types of political seats in a centralized system: those that are corrupted and those that will soon be corrupted. Ask yourself, how do we have these US senators that somehow become quarter billionaires while in the Senate? Here you can see Nancy Pelosi net worth, at least according to News Nation here, 252 million. We're talking about a $250 million. Does that make any sense at all to anyone? Members of the US Congress, senators, and House reps only make 174 grand a year. How do you amass $250 million? Now that we've established that the current system may not be perfect, enter crypto, or more accurately, enter decentralization, because decentralization is really the only way to solve this. In crypto, all the ecosystems use that word decentralization, but a lot of them are just LARPing. They're just faking it. They're those people dressing up in the costumes, pretending to be characters in real life that they are not. Let's be clear here. If you're just LARPing the decentralization part, you're not really doing anything at all. The rest is much easier. It's relatively easy to do the rest of it if you just lop off the decentralization part. But your life is basically a lie. You're the guy at the bar telling girls you're an MIT educated Delta Force operator when you never went to college and you were never in the military. Drinking Black Rifle coffee and listening to Lex Friedman does not make those things true. But a lot of girls aren't going to know the difference, just like a lot of people are going to buy the assets of your decentralization LARP of a blockchain. The average crypto person, they're not you and me. They're not listening to this. They're not watching this video, listening to these words. They're a person who will never know much more about any particular crypto than what Coinbase or Robinhood shows them in the buy tab. So just like every cycle, no one should be shocked by the stupid centralized VC chains popping in and out of the top 20 again this cycle, throwing around, bandying about that word decentralized, even though they're anything but. Remember, LARPs can work in the short term. The fake MIT Delta operator can probably get some number of very mid IQ bar denizens to go home with him, but that's a short term reality that eventually collapses on itself. So, what I'm trying to say here is that you shouldn't freak out about CMC rankings over the next 14 months or so. The decentralization LARPers will have their day in the sun, and it'll be short in comparison to what decentralized chains like Cardano are building. Never forget that EOS, right there, EOS did a $4 billion ICO and was once right up in the top 10, while it's now barely in the top 100. I think it's like number 97. This is not commentary on EOS's decentralization, just saying you can get people to massively buy a coin and then just sort of fade into obscurity. So, if we're not going to be these decentralization LARPers just creating number go up machines, what can we be as an actual decentralized blockchain? Well, Charles has some ideas, as always, and he recently laid them out in this new video I'm calling Whiteboard 2.0. And if you know anything about Charles, you know those two whiteboards there, neither one of them is going to end up blank by the time he's done. Look at this. This is only 3 minutes and 30 seconds into the video. He's already reached the bottom of the first board. Pretty soon, he had filled up the second board and he'd gone back to the first board where he found a little hole where there was no writing that he could fill up with more writing. Just like back in the day, 3-6 Mafia let you know you could not leave your drink, your girl, or other things around them. If Charles were a hip hop guy, he would definitely inform you that you cannot leave a blank whiteboard around him. So, after a couple of hot and heavy sessions of jugging these whiteboards up with text and then using his eraser to make them all clean and fresh again, he filled the boards up one last time. Okay, not even the last time, but another time. And he got to the part where he starts telling us about where we've been and where we're going. We started in 2017 with Ouroboros Classic, which was the first provably secure proof of stake system. I remember when Charles announced this, the very first post announcing this, he said something like, "We've solved the blockchain trilemma." And that was a big selling point of Cardano back in the day. And it was a really big achievement in the science of blockchains. Eventually, that evolved into Ouroboros Paris and Ouroboros Laos, which we are in the process of achieving right now. Really, that's the wrong way to say it. We've actually gone further than that already. From a scientific perspective, Ouroboros Paris and Ouroboros Laos have already been achieved with the publishing of the peer-reviewed papers there. Now we just need to productize them within our ecosystem. Ouroboros Paris aims to shorten settlement times through stake-based voting that boosts the weight of blocks and then modifies the chain selection rule to select the heaviest chain instead of the largest one. So the important thing to remember here, you don't need to remember any of that. You just need to remember Ouroboros Paris aims to shorten settlement times. Ouroboros Laos is actually something we've talked about a lot on this channel for a certain number of years. We've been talking about it for years under a different name, and that name is input endorsers. Here's the Ouroboros Laos paper from May 31st earlier this year. Ouroboros Laos will focus on maximizing the use of available network bandwidth by leveraging stake-based voting and the input endorser idea. You remember input endorsers. This was the whole heartbeat thing, boom, 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 and the transaction pipelining concept that allows for parallel processing. Basically, we'll have three types of blocks: input blocks, reference blocks, and ranking blocks, and there will be more parallel processing, and we'll get to near optimal throughput. And by that, we mean near optimal speed. So if you want to know more about the three different types of blocks and how the parallel processing happens, you can go through and read this paper or one of the many good explanations that are now available on the web, in the Cardano sphere, in various places. But when we say near optimal throughput, near optimal speed, what are we really talking about? How is it optimal? Who decides what is optimal? Really, what we're talking about is we can choose to make this thing go as fast as we want, depending on what kind of hardware requirements we want to include. So we can make the blockchain go as fast as we need. But the faster we make it go, if we decide to make it go too fast, we're going to have to increase the hardware requirements for people to participate in the running of the blockchain. And then we might end up getting much less decentralization. There are certain top 10, let's just say it, there's a certain top 10 blockchain that has these node requirements that make it so that to participate in the running the blockchain, you basically need this crazy, crazy computer with an insane amount of RAM, such that really no normal person can participate in the running of the blockchain. You've got to have this super crazy data center style hardware setup. So we can get to optimal speed depending on whatever decision we want to make about how heavy we want the hardware requirements to be. But to give you some idea, we're not saying here that it's not going to be fast to maintain a healthy level of decentralization. Here's what we're saying. Or rather, here it is directly from the horse's mouth. Here's what Charles was saying just a couple of weeks ago. Laos makes us faster than Solana without losing decentralization. You'll remember when we talked about input endorsers and transaction pipelining, seems like years ago now. What was it, a year ago, 2 years ago now? It was quite a while ago. When we were first talking about that, we were sort of told input endorsers would allow us to go as fast as we want, depending on available resources. We can go as fast as we want, depending on the available resources. The available resources are the hardware. So we can go as fast as we want. We've just got to make this decision about how high we want the hardware requirements to be. And here Charles is telling us, hey, we don't even have to lose any decentralization, and Laos will make us faster than Solana currently is. That's crazy. So think about this for a second. The thing they've always faulted Cardano for has been scaling. They've always said Cardano isn't as fast as Solana, something that Ethereum has also suffered from. But now Cardano is going to have, in Charles's estimation, in that post at least, in Charles's words, a speed, a throughput that is faster than Solana, higher throughput than Solana, without sacrificing any of the decentralization. So we're going to have the best of both worlds, all the decentralization and all the throughput. No one will be able to complain about Cardano's speed any longer. Another thing they've complained about has been this perception, at least, that Cardano is stuck up in the ivory tower doing theoretical stuff, doing all the papers, doing all the papers, and not doing the practical things on the ground that will onboard users and developers and all those things. Basically, not doing the adoption stuff or the scaling stuff that some other blockchains may have done. But Cardano is also now in the era of Voltaire. So when we do a request for proposals for something like Ouroboros Laos, when we put out a notice, hey, anybody, all these development groups who want to build Ouroboros Laos to get a piece of our gigantic treasury, we can decide, do we want them to develop this at the same sort of methodical, meticulous, slower pace that Cardano's always been developed at, or do we want something much quicker? We can decide. It's up to the people who are now governing the ecosystem. It's up to the community to decide how fast they want things to be developed, and it's a trade-off. You develop faster, you're more likely to have little mistakes. But, who knows? Maybe the community will decide, in the past we were too careful. We were too afraid of making mistakes and we went too slowly. So we can also solve the speed of development in Cardano now under Voltaire. And it sounds like Ouroboros Laos with input endorsers in conjunction with Ouroboros Paris, which is going to give us the shorter settlement times, is basically going to allow us to go as fast as we want. And on top of that base layer throughput, we could also do the more specific Basho scaling things like Hydra, which is isomorphic state channels, which means we'll be using the same ledger model on the L2 as on the L1 so that you can process off the main chain, and then the off-chain transactions can be seamlessly reintegrated back into the main chain. So you can do your transactions off-chain in the sense that they're not on the main chain, but they're on this L2 isomorphic state channel, and then you can very easily reintegrate them back into the main chain because it's the same ledger logic on the L2 as on the L1. Then you got Mithril, which is a multi-sig scheme to provide snapshots for node bootstrapping or syncing side chains or light wallets. So we've already seen Mithril in action. We've already seen Hydra in action. You remember they did something like 90 million transactions in one day, and it never affected the main chain because it was all in the Hydra state channel when they were running Doom at Rare Evo. So all of this is part of the enabling of the Cardano layerverse. Partner chains will also be a big part of this, allowing for bespoke rules for any given project to optimize their little corner of Cardano, to optimize for their needs. So Midnight can optimize for its shielded, unshielded dual nature thing. A World Mobile can optimize for its decentralized physical infrastructure needs, and so on. These different layers are going to end up being really important. Even with Laos, you don't want to service millions of customers and billions of transactions on the L1 if we're going to be running everything in Cardano. If we're really trying to create maybe not a network state, maybe a network state one day, but not yet a network state, if we're not quite ready to sign on for like buying our own physical island somewhere in the Caribbean and making that into its own nation state and probably ending up with a war with other Caribbean nations or something. If we're not ready to do that, then we probably are ready to talk about at least running all the things that we need in society. And if we're going to do that, we're going to need all of these different things. I don't think you can really have a blockchain ecosystem that runs everything if you don't have decentralized governance like Cardano does. You also can't do it if you don't have a very, very fast base layer like Cardano will with Ouroboros Laos and Ouroboros Paris. You also need things like Hydra so that use cases that are good for state channels, like running video games and recording every single frame as a transaction, you also need that for those kinds of use cases so you can have the super, super, super crazy TPS for things like that. You also need to have completely different kinds of layers that are maybe only optimized for a certain use case. The use case intended by a project like Midnight that's focused on shielded and unshielded data is very different than the needs of a World Mobile who's focused on decentralized physical infrastructure and telecom stuff. Those are going to be two very different corners of the ecosystem with different rules to accommodate their different use cases. And you can do that in Cardano because we have this partner chain concept. And it's not just a concept because we already have Midnight. So IOG has taken the lead once again and shown us exactly how to build this bespoke layer in the Cardano ecosystem. So that if you want to build something that's totally different than anything we've ever done in Cardano before. And actually, you have to make totally different trade offs on the blockchain trilemma and maybe trade offs we would never be comfortable with on the base layer. You can do that in Cardano, and you don't even have to invent a way to do it because Midnight has already shown you the way. This is how we can become the blockchain that can run everything. And I don't think you can do this if you made wildly different decisions with respect to your base layer. If you created the blockchain base layer that sometimes gets so screwed up, you just have to turn it on and off, that might not work for running everything. If you created the base layer where you have global state because you're an account balance system and you don't have liquid self-custodied staking, maybe that won't work. If you are so lacking in expressiveness that you're stuck in this world of very low programmability like Bitcoin, maybe that won't work. I think you have to have gone through all of the evolutions that Cardano's gone through in order to be the blockchain that can actually approach the capacity to run everything. And obviously, this is going to be something that happens in stages. I don't think we're going to wake up in like 2027 and suddenly the world financial system is running on a blockchain. All of the world identity systems are running on a blockchain, healthcare, all of telecom, everything's running on a blockchain. I think this is going to happen slowly in stages, and there will be other missing things that Cardano is missing at this point that we'll need to integrate into the Cardano ecosystem. But I think if you're asking yourself, what blockchain has done all the things to even approach the capacity to run everything that a whole society is going to need, it's hard to make a case that anybody else has done all those things that isn't called Cardano. Obviously, it's October 2024. In past cycles, next year has been the year when all the fun stuff happens. In past cycles, that's when all the moon Lambos are bought, houses are bought, all the fun stuff happens next year. So naturally, right now, everybody's hyper focused on price and number goes up and breaking through resistance and finding support and all that Fibonacci stuff that everybody gets hyper focused on. Basically, for the next 14 ish months, this is a lot of what's discussed in crypto generally. Does anybody know what's going to happen this time around next year in other blockchains, in the crypto ecosystem as a whole, let alone in Cardano? No, I don't think anybody really knows. These are markets, they're unpredictable. There's a lot of chaos. There are black swan events. A lot of different things can happen next year. I don't think anybody really has any idea. Are a lot of these final pieces of the Cardano puzzle that are coming together right now, are they going to be completed by next year? Probably not. We're probably not going to have like Ouroboros, Laos. It's probably not going to be built out by next year. Is Midnight going to be up and running next year with a lot of transactions? Who knows? Who knows when some of these final pieces are going to be built out and, be fully productized inside the Cardano ecosystem. So I don't think anybody, especially not me, has any idea what next year is going to look like. But because Cardano has front loaded all this work, we've already done the super heavy lift in terms of the research and building out all the initial pieces in the Cardano ecosystem. And we're finally now to this point when we can start productizing these last final pieces, Ouroboros, Paris, and Laos, um, Hydra state channels, all these bespoke partner chains, because we're now at the stage when all these things can be built out and actually productized inside our ecosystem. I think Cardano's best years are going to be the years coming. These coming years are going to be the best years we've ever seen in our ecosystem. I think just based on how much has already been built and the way Cardano has tried to build out all the initial building blocks. I mean, I can't name another blockchain that has addressed all these different things that are required to be the blockchain that can really run everything a society would need. So I think who knows what next year is going to look like? I have no idea, but I think the coming years are going to be Cardano's best years. I think the fruits of all these labors will finally come to hand for our ecosystem, and it's going to be a really fun time to be in Cardano. I hope you're starting out a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.